Welcome to Finding Ourself, a podcast about the power of presence, connection, and the transformation that is only possible through touch. So if you're curious about human connection, somatic healing, or what it really means to belong, you're in the right place. Let's find ourselves together. Hello. Welcome everyone to another episode of Finding Ourselves. And we have a pretty awesome, pretty exciting guest today. My name is Keeley. I am the CEO and co-owner of Cuddlist. I co-host this podcast, and I've been in private practice for a little over 10 years, since 2015. My co-host, Michelle Renee. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Keeley. I'm Michelle Renee. I am also in private practice for almost 10 years in San Diego, and I'm a co-owner and director of training at Cuddlist, and I'm excited to meet our guest today.
Would you, Les, we're so happy to have you here. Would you introduce yourself? Would you mind?
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm Les, and I'm a Cuddlist client and a Cuddle Party participant. I'm also a volunteer with Cuddle Party and kind of a zealot. And in some spaces, a bit of a missionary, but um, I'm here, because I feel the way I do about this kind of interaction and this kind of healing and therapy because it worked so well for me. And when I say that, um, what I mean is, even though I had been, in the process of healing for number of years before I knew anything about cuddle therapy and um, intimacy work, any of that stuff. Um, there were a lot of gaps in my spirit. There just were.
Mhm.
Um, and just because, you know, I do this now, and just because I do it the way I do it, you know, to the degree that it's possible, those gaps are filled. I don't suffer the missing pieces that I had, even after, honestly, thinking I was well on my way to getting better. It turns out that, things that we call embodiment and, the importance of uh, human contact, they, without them, all the therapy in the world does so much, but it won't do more, at least not for somebody like me. Um, I'm uh, comfortable explaining that I came into this from trauma therapy as fairly long-term, I'd say, survivor of long-term childhood sexual trauma. And as probably a lot of people listening suspect, that comes with a lot of moving parts, and there's only so much that can be done by talking to somebody and listening to them, following directions, and an honest desire to get better. If there's no uh, connection that's deeper than that and sort of overwrites that, then some of the pain, it doesn't go away, and the scary part is you kind of get used to it. Um, I was talking to somebody pretty recently that I don't have that pain anymore, and I, in order to, I guess promote this kind of work, I have to try to remember it. You know, I have to say, here was something, just a thorn in the back of my mind, that I just couldn't reach, and it had to be pulled for me. Doesn't quite do it justice, but it's as close as I can get.
It's a really
You
powerful
know,
metaphor, though. It's
Mhm.
beautiful and apt.
and that's why I'm here. So
Mhm.
thank you.
And I
Mm.
want to explicitly thank you so much for being here with us. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of, you've mentioned self work. It just takes, well, I will say, I feel so honored that you are willing to share a little bit about your story and only what you're comfortable with, right? We've already had a little bit of a pre-recording conversation about what you are comfortable with and not comfortable with sharing, making sure we're honoring your wishes and respecting your disclosure of your story. But the fact that you're willing to talk about it at all, it's personal, right? It's vulnerable, it's private, and it does such good in the world to let other people know that you to destigmatize getting support, getting help, getting all kinds of different people on your team to support you in the different ways that that can look. And so I'm just so grateful that you're open to talking to us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. I consider it, a privilege and a great opportunity. So thank you so much.
Thank you for. I'm coming into this with no knowledge about Les's story, and I already connect to it. It just in the work that I've been privy to be a part of, and so I too really want to thank you because it takes very special people to be willing to share their story. Because I know there's a for myself as somebody who does the practitioner side of this work, I find myself crying often that I want to scream on the top of the roof to survivors that there are things that they may not know about, and especially our work being one of them. And it's not a fit for everybody, right? But like when nobody knows about it, I get so scared in a way that people are missing out and I'm not doing enough, right? Like there's a real desire to support, and I can't scream it loud enough. So thank you for being here to help us scream it a little bit.
Well, and from
You're
this
very
side of
welcome.
things, there's only so much that we can say. It's more powerful and more impactful when you know what it's like to receive it. And so, in
Mhm.
that vein, I'm curious what you're comfortable sharing. How did you discover this? How did you discover cuddle therapy, and what made you decide to kind of take the leap to try it?
So um, it's really important to another part of this to understand and have me explain how I did get involved. Just because, as I said, um, that kind of dire circumstance does not have to be how one gets here. But here's how it happened for me. Um, I had been in trauma therapy, uh, for I think about 3 or 4 years, and I was and am also in recovery from really profound and nearly lethal addiction to alcohol, and with really, long-term persistent um, uh, suicidal tendencies and actions. But I was getting better, and for those years, I could honestly say I believe I'm getting well. But one night I was coming home from work, and for no reason at all, um, something kind of took over that had a real similar feeling to the kind of what's called in recovery tunnel vision, where I could only think about being touched, and being held. Although it wasn't quite, it wasn't as clear in my mind at the time as that, but that was basically it. And, I made the unfortunate choice to visit a massage parlor in my area. And I say it's unfortunate because the masseuse that, you know, serviced me, sorry, did nothing wrong at all. She's a very nice and pleasant young woman who was very clearly just doing her job. And, she was pleasant and uh, welcoming, a little distant, but I get why. And, I not only uh, didn't complete the task to be, you know, a little fine about it, but I really badly re traumatized myself. And I say I did this to myself because honestly, I can't put any of it on her. You know, she did nothing wrong. But then, I'd already established this really extraordinary relationship with my trauma therapist. And, one of the worst parts of it was just that I knew I was going to have to, see her the next time I saw her and either A, tell her what happened, or B, not say anything at all. And I couldn't face the idea that I just couldn't bring it up because it hurt too bad, you know. But at the same time, the that kind of trauma is just overwrought with shame and self-loathing and fear and despair. Here I had done all this work and I worked hard, um, and I thought I had, burned it all up. But because, the person I was seeing as a therapist is just a real singular individual. She just kind of knows what she's doing. I spilled it all out for her, and she said, I think I have just the thing. And uh, I think within 48 hours, I had had my first screening call with Madeline, my first cuddle therapist, and another call with herself and Shelley, my trauma therapist, and me. And, the rest is kind of history. I mean, I showed up at Madeline's door, the way I was, which was not the best shape. Um, and the whole time I was on my way there, I was, you know, totally unsure of what to expect or, what was going to be done, except, just this vague, this lady is going to, like paw at me for an hour and then I'll be better, I didn't know, and I wasn't in my most positive frame of mind. But as we all know, it's nothing like that. It was nothing like that. It was as uh, reassuring and calming and welcoming as any way I'd ever been treated before by anybody. Um, but even so, you know, um, I needed to be brought into it, and I needed to be shown, the importance for me of how we manage boundaries and consent and autonomy and the the nature of the space that we were in. I mean, not just the physical space, but what we were, what I was being shown how to help generate between the two of us. Um, After the session, I was very light on my feet. I felt a lot better. I'm skeptical that it could be reproduced, but I thought at least this happened, you know. And then it happened again, and again and again and again. And every time, he and I were uh, were able and willing, to explore all kinds of things that, to be honest, had little to do with what we were doing with our bodies. But you know, I assure people all the time, if it wasn't for that element of it, the rest of it is a whole lot harder. It takes a lot longer and it doesn't stick. The one thing I've found about therapy, it just in general, is if I can't hold on to it, then why am I doing it? Um, the work that I do nowadays, mostly with Keeley, um, when I'm done, you know, with a session, doesn't matter whether it's in person or virtual, I have something to take with me, something I can use, and it comes in handy in situations that I never would have imagined it would matter, but it works all the time, and very seldom, do I feel like uh, dissatisfied with what I've made use of as a result of, these sessions. And like I said, um, in the kind of shape that I was in the very beginning, before, I had anything to do with cuddling, I was so skeptical and I was so cynical about, the possibility that I could get better, that being proven wrong, that it is possible. I was able to carry that with me. And then, when I had that setback, I got scared, right? I really thought, man, I blew it. And maybe I'm just not supposed to be here, you know. Um, but, just right where my trauma therapist, Shelley, uh, sort of, the limits of her ability to help me, all of you just picked it right up and said, oh, yeah, we got it from here, right? Here's how we do what we do. Here's what it'll do for you. Just relax, and all of you having that kind of confidence, you know, um, and that kind of, I guess, assured competence. It makes a lot of difference to me even now, but back then it was like that was all I had to hang on to. You know, a lot of things have changed since then. For me, my world is very different now than it was at that time. And I will say it's much better. You know, but again, um, I guess I want people listening and watching to understand that was my particular, you know, journey to arrive here. I don't recommend it, to happen that way for anybody else. But however it happens, you know, a little bit of believing in it and a little bit of just being willing to try goes a very long way. So I hope that helps.
I think that,
Thank you.
especially the beginning of your story, yeah, echoing that, Michelle. Thank you.
Mhm.
It powerfully vulnerable, powerfully honest, right? And I think that what you just said about it, you hope that not everyone comes to this work in the same way that you did. But I gotta tell you, I think that that's a more relatable
Mhm.
experience than people will often let on. I think that getting to a place of isolation or of the lack of just human comfort in the form of some kind of touch, like a hug or a handhold or a pat on the back, like literally anything, just this kindness through like being with another human. That the lack of that, or the lack of access to that, is not rare.
No,
It's certainly not as common as we would all hope it is. And getting to you mentioned a tunnel vision kind of a place of like, that's, I just need something. I think that's really relatable, more so than people would want to maybe acknowledge or understand. And then only understanding a few options, only knowing that
yeah.
things like massage parlors exist, I think that's also extremely common. And so I think
Mhm.
very understandable and human, and like I said, probably more relatable than you might imagine or might think, that people would go and do those things. And then what strikes me as the most remarkable part of it all is that after an experience that for you was so, whatever word, how you want to describe it, tough, challenging, you said re-traumatizing, right?
Mm,
Afterwards, you still were honest with your therapist. You still then, you said it beautifully, nail on the head with it. It's those kinds of experiences often trigger that re-shaming, that re-traumatizing, that spiraling sometimes for folks. And instead of going that path, you were able to, with the support of your trauma therapist, look for something a little different as opposed to giving up at that moment. That's the beautiful, remarkable part of it, and a very, um, the thing I hope people hear when they hear how powerful your story is.
thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned, the commonness of isolation and loneliness and alienation. It's all too common. That's an obstacle to overcome all by itself.
Mhm.
And the uh, you know maybe not deep shame, but at least embarrassment and feel fear of uh, being honest about it. I I agree with you. That is common, and you know becoming more common every day. And like Michelle, you said, I get terrified when I think about the scope of that. It just really feels overwhelming if I mess with it too much. But I guess if there's something about my story to avoid or at least be careful of, is letting it fester, and just uh, being resigned to it, and just believing, that there is no way out. Right? When I talk to people about, oh, you know, their, I guess, confidence in, the ability to feel less lonely and to feel more connected with the people that they're trying to be connected with, a lot of those same things come up, that just don't feel like it's within reach. And uh, for me, the element of, I guess, alienation and isolation, um, it's a lot easier to, have a reasonable equilibrium with solitude. And I have a lot of it. I live alone. I have quite some time. But, I don't feel lonely. Can't really remember the last time I really felt that way, where I really felt isolated. And it's something, where it started with, just these few people that I could really let in and, who would let me in. But it's a bigger circle now. It's a larger group of people. Because of them, I don't feel, you know, that press of, wow, it's just me. You but like I said, I've talked with Keeley about this before too, that this is doable. And, a lot of times it's really enjoyable. It can be very fun. I'm not I don't pursue fun for its own sake very often, once in a while. But even so, just by accident, I will really have a good time,
Oops.
and yeah, and I was like, oh, that happened. But um, beyond that, uh, like I said, it provides, I don't know, people use the word tools and uh, skills. That doesn't quite do it justice because those are more measurable. This really isn't. It will just do things for a person that, other kinds of therapy or healing or, you know, personal endeavor just won't do. And people have, some people I talk to are kind of uh, rooted in tradition in the past, and they seem to believe that, this used to just that feeling and those supports used to just show up as a matter of course, all by themselves. And ironically, it's usually people a good bit younger than me. I mean, I'm 64 years old, and I'm like, what you're talking about is a period of time when I was here, and I will tell you, it was not like that. Certainly not for everybody.
Yeah.
But the means to make that happen, like I said, it's a lot of fun, and it's something anybody can do. It's not really a free ride. It's something you have to want to do. And, you know, there are things like ideas and preconceptions you kind of have to give up. You know, some people hold those ideas and preconceptions pretty close.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it's really worth it, but it ain't free. You know, you will go in knowing that you're going to come out different, or you won't come out different.
Yeah. What I hear is you really kind of had this snowball effect of community, right? Your community started with your therapist, it sounds like. I'm a big fan of Pete Walker's book on complex PTSD and talking about therapist. It's written for therapists. You become the first committee member for your client in a lot of ways because we have the science that says that the number one predictor of successful therapy is the connection between the therapist and the client, right? And so like I like to think as like as cuddlist, we become a potential one of those committee members, which is community, right? So now you've got your therapist, you have Madeline, right? Madeline was one of my committee members, right? I think all of us have been affected by Madeline that are on the screen right now, right?
Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
the cuddle party becomes a community. And I imagine it started to change how you interacted with other people in your life, right? There's this rippling effects that goes from isolation to like in it sounds like the thing that kind of glued that was the fact that you took a risk to be honest with the one person that you had that connection with. And I like to talk in like inner child and, thinking about our childhood wounds.
Mhm.
I know for my clients and for me, I was taught that that wasn't safe, to be honest. And so you made a choice to do something different, which gave you a different result.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that. Thank
me
you.
too. I'm very pleased about it. And like I said, it does come in handy. A lot of my personal life, is sort of bound up in all of this. Yeah. But there's, other spaces, and I tell people I sit around a few different campfires. And one thing, that I've noticed um, dealing with, you know, people well outside of our community here is that um, I have to use different language, maybe, or at least describe what we sort of understand in terms sort of looking from the outside in and describing, um, what the uh, what the purpose of what we do in the welcome circle at a cuddle party, the opening agreement in a cuddle session, or in the exercises that are that we'll sometimes do at one event or another. That it isn't for fun. You know, it is fun a lot of the time, but that's not the end goal. And that they understand. You know, another thing that kind of goes along with that is I don't really have, I guess, reluctance, to kind of put an edge on my presentation with anyone, that I'm talking to about it, to say, look, look me in the face right now and tell me everything's okay out there. You know, we know it's not, right? The other point is, if this looks exotic or, you know, uh, out of reach or, uncomfortable, whatever, you know, you need to admit to me, we've tried everything else. It didn't work. If it had worked, I'd shut up, right? I wouldn't bother you with it. I'm happy. I mean, this makes me happy. I'd leave you alone, but not working. It's not working in the lives of the individuals that I'm having these discussions with, and it's not working anywhere else either.
Yeah.
This is reliable. You know, it can be made to serve needs under most circumstances, except for the most really extreme. For regular people, like I said, this is functional. It does the job. But when I'm, among all of you, I don't have, it's like, I don't have to make that claim, because everyone says, yeah, I mean, that is the sort of worldly part of it, the day-to-day part of it. The rest of it, the only way to find out about it is to do it.
Yeah,
But
it's gonna be different. I mean, the
mm,
the reasons people show up in this work are all different. There's no like, these are my clients. I can't put them all in a box.
Hmm.
mm,
And I can't even put in the box what they're gonna get out of it. Because
mm,
everybody is showing up, starting in a different place, thinking they want something out of it, I assume. And what they actually get out of it is probably way more than they ever thought, because it's I don't know, I say there's like sneaky little lessons that come in, right? That it it's such an interesting playground to experience being human.
yeah,
And we're all different. So of course we're going to show up differently, and we're going to pull different things from it. And what we're going to hold on is different for me than it is for Keeley and than it is for you, Les, right? But that is hard to put in a how do you explain that to someone? And yeah, I appreciate that that you're out there doing the missionary work, because I often say, like, I can't be the Avon lady. Like, I get tired of knocking on the door and saying, like, "Trust me, I have this amazing service. I want you to just try it and see what it means to you."
Yeah.
Feels kind of it starts to feel tiresome and a little gross to be the only one,
Yeah.
knocking on the door. So, much gratitude
Mhm.
to you, and just I don't know, I have such respect for the people that take the risk to just try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of cheat the system a little bit because um, when I'm having those kind of conversations in those spaces, it's usually with people that, already know like all the horror stories that, you know, I've been through.
Mhm.
So, it's like I can kind of say whatever I want as long as I'm being honest, and it's like, what are they going to say? You know, that I have come right up out of hell, and I am telling you this is the way out, either believe me or not, but most of the time, like I said, unless it's somebody really, suffering and embittered and cynical, which I mean, there's tons of that out there too. Um, it's not that hard to say, like you say, I don't come off like the Avon, I'm uh, not pushing a product, but at the same time, like I said, because you know this about me, you know that this kind of work does this for me. And, the other nice part about it is that, I can tell them, you don't know who I was before,
Mhm.
you know. Um, the people that were in my life back there have made it very clear that they never want to have to do with me again, and there's a reason for that, right? And I'm like, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm this one, right? And because of that, I can say here, it's like, here is what to avoid, because let's be honest about it, there's plenty of people and institutions and organizations out there promising, a can't miss deal to get you out of loneliness and depression, et cetera, et cetera. And frankly, it's everything from absurd to horrible, and most of it is just impractical. It's not; those are not the kind of things you can just keep doing, right? This you can keep doing indefinitely, and not only that, but like I said, it does that job, that these salespeople pretend to offer, but it just doesn't work. I
I
know I tried a lot of it,
It sounds too simple, right? That I don't know. I say often that I'm a firm believer that love heals and that most of us haven't gotten to really actually experience what that love feels like.
Mhm.
And I say it from a sense of like it's a verb about caring for another person.
Yeah,
And when I talk about being the practitioner on the side of this is like I'm so lucky that I get paid to love people.
right.
Mhm.
Like, I love people anyways, and that I get to actually do this professionally and that it's helpful and that there is, um, that I can be the soft place where people get to re-experience healthy, maybe for the first time, touch, communication, discourse. Healthy discourse is even a thing that I get to happily um let clients experience if that's something that is in their need to let their nervous system normalize discourse, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with them, it doesn't mean the relationship has to end, or um to have a place for a client to address those uncomfortable memories and make a different memory around that space. Like, what a lovely opportunity that this work has created, because I don't think that I don't think when Madeline and Adam created Cuddlist that it was in the sense that one day we're going to be doing this extra kind of work, like that it was just going to be a place for people to have an opportunity to experience safe touch and connection.
Right.
And what we've been able to watch come out of that from our clients and for ourselves. I know I've grown so much doing this work and practicing these same things in my family system,
Yeah.
right? In my friend system. This isn't something that you just take a part of like for an hour and then you go home and you never touch it again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. And the like beginnings of it is something that Madeline and I used to talk about occasionally, where it started and, how I kind of backed into it and what, it looks like it's going to have to become, and I kind of compare it to, my own little journey of recovery and, growth and all of that. Um, while at the same time, it parallel to all of that, like I said, uh, I guess probably false sense of security and stability and equilibrium and community that uh, people used to assume was always there. It's becoming clearer all the time that it's going away. And they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I don't like it either. you know and so I will just go build one of my own. And so you know that's kind of the way it played out. And Madeline, she's uh has this spirit of, you know I'll try to do it myself and see what happens, you know because this looks like something but it's not quite right, and I'll do this. It's like that takes a lot of courage, but a lot of the courage is just, say, just like with me, not knowing in it really at all how it's going to turn out. I had no idea 10 years ago, that my life would be like this and I would be having conversations like we are now, and like I said, when I thanked you guys in the beginning, I mean it, because there is no part of my life that's more rewarding than this. It always makes me feel really good. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I have a, a colleague's voice in my ear talking about hope and courage, right? And the
Yeah,
message that, what do we do without hope? I
yeah,
just, yeah. I think about first time clients, they come in, they're so scared. And I always let them know that I'm nervous too, right? That this is not just a one way, this is a normal, like human response to trying something new and to put yourself in such vulnerability with another person that you don't know yet.
right,
And
right.
and then, you know, when we come with difficult backgrounds that make that connection harder to come by, just again, I thank you for letting people know that there is another option.
There is, there is.
Yeah.
Somebody I was talking to not that long ago was talking about, losing hope because he had been. Things are better now for him, but, he was really like struggling. I said, it's something to be really careful with, because you can get really used to feeling hopeless, you know, and it just eats at something inside, and you start looking for a way out, and I said, me well enough to know that I looked, I was like, for a fact that I shouldn't even be here, I should be a statistic. People, healthcare providers that have examined my body, and said, we're not exactly sure how you didn't die, but you didn't, you know. And so, like, here I am, but I'm like, that's the end point of not doing anything or not doing the right thing, to overcome that. It's very insidious. I mean, sense of it's like a sense of hopelessness begins with, you know, uh, reliance on skepticism and uh, just sort of letting it degrade into cynicism and shame, that starts out as just mild social anxiety and embarrassment. But I mean, it comes, and after a certain point, it'll hit you like a freight train, and if you let it go that far, it's kind of too late to stop. Then you have pieces, a mess to clean up, like I did, you know, and like I got so much help in cleaning up. It takes a lot of work. It's better just to go ahead and you know intervene now when it's just feeling kind of crappy and it's not just a permanent cloud over your head. Once you get there, it's outrunning it is very difficult.
Yeah, but it is possible.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
here I am. You
there
know,
you are.
so
Is there
Mm.
anything that you are the most surprised about that you learned about yourself, or the most surprising result of participating in cuddle therapy?
yeah, even when I was uh, in recovery and in standard therapy, one thing I was pretty sure of was that because of my life path and because of the environment we're all in, I was pretty sure that, there would always be kind of an obstacle and an antipathy between myself and women in general, you know. And I kind of just approach it like, well, I'm just going to have to live with that, you know, and deal with it, because at minimum, the half of the people I interact with on the daily are use all, but the thing happened pretty quickly, really, and it was really surprising. Was that I'm not obliged to remove that obstacle, but it doesn't have to be there, and there are many more reasons to remove it than there are to keep it in place. And that uh, again, some of the spaces I spend time in, they wear that obstacle like a badge of honor, right? Like it's something, I don't know, to encourage. I'm like, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, you know, and some of them were people that were, around me when I was still feeling that way. So, but, you got to remember, here are the people, here are the women that made it possible for me to do things that I just wasn't able to do on my own, and for me to, to keep that obstacle in my way, it's not only unwise, but it's hypocritical. And it makes me dishonest, you know. So I don't do that anymore, right? I mean, I live the way I live, and I have boundaries, right? But the fact of the matter is, that um, the things that I was being, I don't want to say pressured, but yeah, kind of pressured, you know, to uh, to take on and vocalize about and and live with, it's not true. You know, I mean, women, they're not perfect either, but the uh, this like unshakable antipathy and friction and separation, it's something we've kind of talked ourselves into accepting, or pushing back against. I kind of do neither. I just know that I don't have to live that way, right? And I know I don't have to uh, hold on to that. And 6 months before I started doing this, if anybody had told me that, don't know if I'd have believed them. I might have nodded my head and been like, uh-huh. But, I had to be shown, right? It had to be demonstrated. And now I know, I mean, there's one thing about being, really, I guess, pragmatic, is that, if I am shown that something is real and it actually works, then I don't have an argument, and I don't care to argue. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And so far in this, whole process, from the very beginning, I have found that I have been wrong about a great many things, and one of the things I was the most wrong about was who I was and what I'm worth.
Mm.
And like I said, it took at least as many women to show me that as men. And I was in company. A lot of the men I was in company with are good men. And they assured me that I was a good dude. But I just wasn't quite believing it. It had to be demonstrated. So I guess that was a shock for me, but I'm getting used to it.
Mm. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like we could keep chatting. I already have a list of more questions I want to ask, right? So maybe this doesn't have to be the full stop end of the conversation, but for today, there's so much to chew on and there's so much to sit with and process and so much to be grateful for in the conversation that we've already had. So I want to again celebrate the you who is showing up with us now and all of the versions of you that it took to get you here. Celebrate all of those. Celebrate that you have got and shaped and worked for the life that you have right now. And thank you for sharing a piece of it with us and with other
Yeah.
people, sharing that truth, sharing that story. It's a powerful story.
Most welcome. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah. Thank you for letting me know you in this little bit of time. Like, I'm sure I don't know nearly enough of you, but thank you. I really, really have so much gratitude for your vulnerability and your willingness to share. And thank you for taking the risk to show up with Madeline.
Mm-hmm.
I took a risk to show up with Madeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like
Relatable.
I love this thread that connects us together. So I will always feel connected to you now, Les. So thank you so much for
Thank
like
you.
letting me know you a little bit.
Thank you. And
There's a
yeah, she
theme
does that.
throughout. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I say Madeline, she does do that,
Mhm.
There's
but
also
that's
this
how.
incredible theme through what you've shared that I hear, and it's just an incredible amount of strength.
Mhm.
Just an incredible amount of strength. It takes strength to what you even most recently were like, yeah, and then I learned I was wrong about things, and as long as you can show me that there is all right, like I said, okay, I was wrong. As long as I know where
Mhm.
the path is for it, like that takes strength.
Mhm.
That takes so much character in order to put like the attachment to being right is lesser than the okay, but what's the truth? But what's the thing? What's the answer? That's what I care about. Like there's just so much strength in that. So I appreciate that. And you've given us all and everyone listening such a really great gift. and a
Thank
good
you.
modeling of what a lot of strength and bravery and a lot of work looks like. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
with
you.
that, I will say that yeah, we'll have to pick this up another time. And for anyone listening, I hope you got as much out of this as we all got. And until the next time that we talk to you, big hugs if you want them.
Mm.